Hello everyone. In this video, I'll show you how to make a pivot table in Excel. Let's dive in. Before we can make a pivot table, we first need to prepare the data. You'll need to make sure your data is in a tabular format. So, what does that mean? Well, you'll need columns with headers at the top and all of the related data below. Next, I also recommend turning your data into a table. This step is optional. It's not mandatory. But if you plan on adding or removing data, it will be much easier to refresh your pivot table. To insert a table, go up to the top, click on Insert, and here you'll see the option for Table. Click on that. It should automatically detect all of your data. If your table has headers, check that box, then click OK. Now that we've inserted a table, we're ready to create a pivot table. Up on the top tabs, click on Insert, and on the far left side, you'll see the option for Pivot Table. Click on that and Excel will identify the table with all of this data. Here, you have the choice to insert it in a new worksheet or in an existing one. I'll select New and then click OK. This now opens a new worksheet, and on the right-hand side, you'll see a new pane appear called Pivot Table Fields. On the worksheet itself, there's a placeholder area for the pivot table. We can now start building our pivot table. One thing to note, if you click outside the pivot table, the Pivot Table Fields pane will disappear. To bring it back, simply click back into the pivot table. Up at the top, we see all the different pivot table fields: date, salesperson, region, product, sales amount, and quantity sold. These fields correspond to the column headers on the previous worksheet. You'll see the headers align with all these pivot table fields here. Now, I'd like to find out which salesperson at the Kevin Cookie Company generated the most revenue. With a pivot table, that's really easy to figure out. I'll grab the salesperson field by pressing and holding it, and then drag it down to the rows area and release. On the left side, you'll now see rows filled with the names of our sales team members. Next, to see who generated the most revenue, I'll drag the sales amount field to the values area. This field represents revenue, so it's perfect for calculating totals. Once I release it, we can now see on the left who generated the most revenue. It looks like Alice is on top with $14,000. This pivot table shows the sum of sales for each salesperson, but you can also summarize the data in different ways. For example, if I right-click here, I'll find the option to Summarize Values By. By default, it's set to Sum, but you could also choose Count, Average, Max, Min, or Product. Let's try Max. By clicking on that, I can see the maximum order size for Alice, which was $971. Pretty impressive. I'll right-click again, choose Summarize Values By, and switch it back to Sum, so I can view the total revenue again. Currently, the data is sorted from highest sales to lowest sales, but I can sort it differently if I prefer. By right-clicking, I have the option to Sort. Here, I could choose Smallest to Largest instead, and now it looks like Diana is on the lower end with $11,000. However, that's not too far behind Alice. I can right-click again, select Sort, and switch back to Largest to Smallest to see Alice on top again. In addition to seeing revenue by salesperson, I'd like to know which region each sale came from. Over on the right side in the pivot table fields, there's a region field. Let's try dragging it over to columns first. Once I release, you'll notice columns appear for each region on the left. Now, for each salesperson, I can see the revenue generated in each region along with a grand total. Maybe I'd like to try a different view though. Here, I'll drag Region to the rows area below Salesperson. This adjusts the view on the left, so now I have regions as rows under each salesperson's name. The view is now organized with the salesperson at the top level and the region below it. If I wanted to, I could switch the order by dragging Region above Salesperson. Now the regions are listed first, followed by the salespeople. If I decide I don't need the region field anymore, removing it is simple. I'll drag region out to the side, release it, and it will be removed, bringing us back to the original view. You can change your data view in a number of ways to suit your needs. Next, I'd like to see revenue just for chocolate chip cookies. In the Pivot Table Fields pane, I'll take Product and drag it down to the Filters area. Now, on the left side, there's a filter for product. By clicking on this drop-down, I can see all of the products we offer at the Kevin Cookie Company. I'll select chocolate chip and then click OK. This filters the revenue view to show only chocolate chip cookie sales. Interestingly, Eve sold the most chocolate chip cookies. To remove this filter, I'll click the drop-down again, select All, and then click OK to see the total revenue once more. If I want to completely remove the filter, I can drag it out, just like we did with the region field. Over on the left side in my pivot table, I can see the revenue generated by each salesperson, but I'd like to see what percentage of the total revenue each person contributed. To do this, I'll take the sales amount field and drag it again to the values area, which creates a second column with the revenue sum. I'll right-click on this column, and within this menu, I'll select Show Values As. From the options, I'll choose Percent of Column Total. Now I can see the percentage of total revenue each salesperson generated. It looks like Alice drove around a quarter of our total revenue, which is impressive. I also want to rename these column headers to make them clearer. Right now it says Sum of Sales Amount To, which isn't very descriptive. I'll click into the header and type Percent of Total Revenue to better describe this column. To adjust the look and feel of the pivot table, go up to the Design tab where you can change the color scheme, add banded rows or columns, and more. There's also a grand total at the bottom of the table. If you'd prefer to hide or show this, click on Grand Totals and make your choice. While pivot tables are powerful, sometimes it's helpful to visualize the data as a chart. Up at the top, click on Insert and you can select any type of chart. Here, I'll insert a column chart, which is now linked to my pivot table. So if I make changes like removing fields, you'll notice the chart updates automatically. I can add the sales amount back in and it reappears on the chart. Another helpful feature is Slices. With the pivot chart selected, go to Pivot Chart Analyze and click Insert Slicer. Here I can choose a field to slice the data by. Let's choose Region and click OK. A slicer for region now appears, allowing me to filter the chart by region. If I click on Los Angeles, the chart automatically updates to show data just for that region. I can turn this filter off to see data for all regions again. One last thing before we wrap up. If you add new data to your pivot table, it won't update automatically. To refresh, click into the pivot table, then go to Pivot Table Analyze and click Refresh. This updates the view with any new data you've added. And that's it. You now have a powerful tool to analyze your data. If this video helped you out, feel free to buy me a coffee using the link in the description. This will support the channel so I can keep making more videos like this.